Today's video is being brought to you with help from G Fuel, one of the most popular energy supplements on the market, known for providing fuel for the focus of a new generation of gamers, creators, students, and athletes. Made with top-tier ingredients, their sugar-free formulas give you the energy, focus, and endurance you need to power through your daily tasks. And if you are interested in getting your hands on some, either to try it out for the first time and see if it's right for you, or to resupply your favorite flavor and are looking for a bit of a discount, please use the code DSIEGE and get 20% off your next purchase, while at the same time supporting this channel and helping me continue to create the content you've all come to enjoy. I'll leave a link in the description below if you're interested, and thank you in advance for any who choose to purchase using my code. I very much appreciate your support. Without further ado, on to the featured presentation.
It's about the other rejects we consigned to Lua a few years ago. They're calling it transference. We cultured the infestation, conceiving of a hybrid, transformed, but only just. The Helminth was created, born to yield these new warriors, worthy of battle against you, the great and terrible Hunhow. We took our greatest, volunteers or not, and polluted them with these cultured reagents. They transformed. They became infested. Their skin blossomed into sword steel, their organs interlinked with untold resilience. Yet their minds were free of the infested madness. Or so we thought.
Operator, no! Have you lost your mind? What was that? Is it talking? What did it say?
Hey all, Siege here, and today I want to get into an area of the game that most of us frequent these days, but it certainly wasn't always that way. For a great many of you, in fact, you may have looked at this curiously sealed door at one point, a kind of odd type of what looks to be biological growth manifesting all over the entrance, and wondered, what is in there? Players wouldn't have to wait too long, as the once-away quest, where the Infested would resurface within our universe, in fact gave those players a bit of a hint, but only just. And if at that point you were following the lore, it probably made you even more curious and maybe even a little bit worried at what the aforementioned door was hiding now. But, at the very least, offered potentially significant context as to why it appeared impossible to get in. Something was obviously in there. Something that needed to stay in there. And it turns out that something was the final evolution of a techno-organic virus that is assumed to be created by the Orkan as a tool to rebuild the damage they caused during the expansion of their empire, according to Warframe's Cephalon fragments. The Infestation spreads across the Origin system, a techno-organic parasite that attaches itself to natural and synthetic forms, slowly digesting the host subject and transforming it on a molecular level. Organic materials morph into new homogeneous organisms, while harder, inorganic materials like metals will change structurally into a pseudo-organic substance that holds the characteristics of its previous forms. Earth has long been abandoned due to its toxic atmosphere. It is now overgrown with mutated jungle structures that have devoured most of the prior signs of civilization. Infestation and roaming wildlife still inhabit its surface, but anything of value was stripped by scavengers generations ago. Most of the wildlife observed today can be traced back to creatures of Earth. In the Orkan Age, Organic manipulation was used to modify Earth life forms to a purpose. War, agriculture, pets. Long after their Orcan masters perished, some of the species managed to survive through adaptation and can be found roaming in natural environments. The Infestation was, in fact, a solution to the limited resources remaining amongst their dying worlds, and when first developed was most assuredly heralded as a godsend. Infestation of a living natural organism and the transformation of its molecular structure happens much more rapidly than with large synthetic ships or machinery. Infested nanites quickly break down organic tissue and begin to evolve the existing specimen into a new organism with characteristics and functions ideal for survival and self-defense. In many cases, visible traces of the victim's original form are still visible in the new mutated form, a stark and horrifying memorial. Having the ability to take what was left of the planet, organic or not, and repurpose it to do, well, whatever it was directed to, on the surface should have been a breakthrough of unparalleled brilliance, functioning specifically through the utilization of nanotechnology, the manipulation of matter at near atomic scale to produce new structures, materials, or devices. But it was somehow shut down at some point, and for good reason, never to be reawoken. And yet, even as it was, the door remained closed, until the introduction of Nidus with the glassed gambit update, a particularly telling frame, appearing to be made completely of the aforementioned substance versus the traditional look of Warframes, them mostly garnering a sleek and typically clean defined form. What's more, this inched us closer to the actual truth, making something we'd already been told by one of the earlier bosses, Lephantis, finally make sense. Lephantis, of course, was another infested creation of the Orcan, comprised of 3 entities, of which 2 appear to be soldiers of the Corpus and Grineer respectively, and the last, an actual Orcan human, all conjoined together in a rather horrific manner. And for as off-putting as it was but a taste of what the Orcan were capable of producing, and nothing close to their finest work. No, that would require more than just the Infestation on its own. But, as the Orcan have shown, there's very little they aren't capable of when they put their incredibly ingenious but overly ambitious minds to work. And as we've seen in multiple scenarios, literally nothing is sacred aside from the very top of the hierarchy.
We were forced to older means, not circuits, nor light, but flesh and disease. Our horrors past, our ravaged outer colonies became gardens. We cultured the Infestation, conceiving of a hybrid, transformed, but only just. The Helminth was created, born to yield these new warriors, worthy of battle against you, the great and terrible Hunhow. We took our greatest. You served with distinction, old Dax. We commissioned a portrait in your honor, there, on the wall.
The sentient battle at Hull. I can't imagine. You were awarded the Lua Cross for valor.
Volunteers or not, and polluted them with these cultured reagents. Good morning, old friend. I'm afraid the disease has taken your voice, but we've prepared the finest serums to treat you. They transformed. They became infested. But only just. Their skin blossomed into sword steel, their organs interlinked with untold resilience. Yet their minds were free of the infested madness. Or so we thought. We drugged them, tortured them, eviscerated them. We brutalized their minds.
This poison he's given you, it has taken your will away. You are a victim as much as your son.
sorry, Isa. The time has come.
We are together.
I am honored to be your son.
Valis did this. Not you.
Don't worry, old friend. I'm not going to kill your boy. You are.
Father? Father!
Literally nothing's sacred, aside from the very top of the hierarchy when bringing these innovations to fruition, including, it would seem, even the most gifted among them. Which leads us back to what's behind the door. For those that were following the story the entire time, we finally had an answer as to what exactly this thing is, and more importantly, what it does. Something Ortis has long told us.
Disgusting, is it not, Operator? Ortis would enjoy
Purging this.
cleaning this room, but sadly this vile mass serves you and your warframes a necessary evil.
But only now are the specifics of its capabilities fully coming into view. Firstly, a kind of operating or exam chair, seemingly overrun with what most had already feared laid behind the door to begin with. How this seemingly uncontrolled virus hadn't chewed through our orbiter is a mystery until we come to understand that this has a name.
What was that? Is it talking? What did it say?
Helminth, another name for a kind of parasitic worm, they are in fact leeches and intestinal parasites that receive nourishment and protection while disturbing their host's ability to absorb nutrients. And I believe this to be an important point of reference when considering our Helminth, an entity that speaks to us when in the infirmary, as it's known, and has always been, as Ortis puts it,
Vile. Putrid. This thing is responsible for biological functions of the orbiter. A strange design. Why would I be built with such a flaw?
more specifically, it is in charge of both reactive and preventative maintenance on our warframes, the method by which they are repaired and more recently enhanced. With these enhancements coming at the cost of feeding it. Whereas this may have once been another operating or incubating chamber of sorts, the room itself has evolved, with it growing a head, but more specifically an orifice, making consumption of larger quantities of both organic and inorganic material far easier. Something I'm sure that has put basic farming back on the menu for a great many of us, even after not having to do it in ages. But it does fall in line with infested behavior, changing itself to become more efficient with its primary function. In this case, to consume more to produce more. It makes you wonder what this room may one day look like, because there's really no limit to what one can feed it. Although it does have its preferences, and this too would fall in line with the techno-organic nature of both what it is as well as what it creates. The infested we continue to fight against appear to behave in a very similar manner, but the orbiter's Helminth is on the surface much more controlled, which in turn would suggest that the infestation is not influenced or controlled by a singular mind. But then, what delineates command? Is it strain specific? Or are there escalating levels of granularity within a kind of hierarchy? At face value, the contradiction of it both attacking us, especially after clearly identifying our warframes as familiar in nature, as Lephantis demonstrates, and Helminth not consuming, or at the very least not sabotaging our ship and our warframes in some way, suggests it's receiving direction from a different intelligence. These minds, controlling different facets of the infestation, were most likely, at least at one point, entirely under Orcan control. The thing people rarely question is whether the evolution of the Infested as we know it today was essentially the product of an experimental technology out of control, or does the existence of this chair aboard our orbiter and how it behaves open the possibility that all of it was done by design. I think you may find the area to be a bit more gray than anyone would be comfortable to admit. It's unclear as to the true intentions behind the initial development of the Technocyte virus, as there is very little information regarding how or when it was developed, but it is most certainly based upon a virus of the same name from another title in Digital Extreme's past, Dark Sector. And in fact, many have speculated that much of the game's early lore actually derives from that world. When comparing the two, it is interesting how much of it matches up with certain aspects of both the Infestation specifically, but also with the overarching narrative as well. If you'd like a video on the Infested in its entirety, its different forms and origin theories, let me know in the comments. I think that would be a fun video to explore before the 1999 update. It's important to state here that there are some differences as well though. So whereas it may not end up becoming the exact history of Warframe, the similarities shown between Warframe 1999 and Dark Sector are hard to ignore, and the little Easter eggs found on the walls and even on the television insinuate some connection between these two worlds. Given that the multiverse both exists and can be accessed in Warframe, it's not too much of a stretch to consider that they may physically cross over to each other at some point. Unless, of course, they already have. With that in mind, we can potentially consider Dark Sector's lore, at least in origin, as a potential theory or history of the Infested, called the Infected in that title. Or at least, if nothing else, look at some inspiration for its potential design. Something I'm guessing we will eventually get more information on, given the context of what the trailer for 1999 has already shown. In Dark Sector, the virus was developed as a bioweapon, being deployed upon sections of an unaware populace, and in the process, infecting those around them with an insatiable hunger, as well as an overly aggressive feral state, in what is depicted in that universe as the Cold War era, which, if based upon our current history, could have occurred shortly after World War II, when the machinations of it originally began, all the way up through the 1980s, with it officially ending in 1991. With the dissolution of the Soviet Union. It's important to note that in Warframe's lore, as mentioned prior, the bulk of the information regarding the early aspects of the Infestation portray it being utilized as a method of cultivating new agriculture amongst barren worlds, but it is possible its origin was in fact the same in nature as in Dark Sector, essentially military research that was repurposed for civilian benefit. While originally believing that it mutated during this planetary regrowth, most likely when either being consumed as sustenance or in some form of airborne contagion emitted from the newly formed vegetation, the imagery presented in the trailer for Warframe 1999 seems to put that into question. So until we get more information, take it as you will. What we can surmise regarding its beginning in this world at least can be found in Alberic's notes concerning the vessels.
I went among the denizens of the plague year like a savior, my hands filled with healing. To those who volunteered, I brought more than mere health. Their bodies were primed. It needed only the Helminth infusions brought from my own time to work the alchemy of transformation. They have become partial warframes, still in possession of their free will, yet enhanced void-attuned, capable. As their loyal doctor, I have taken repeated samples from them. The sight of their technocyte-riddled cells mutating gave me fresh visions. I could take this material, work with it, forge new creations. Eagerly, I brought the samples back to Deimos and began to cultivate them. Not long after, the first of my vessels took form. A giant to battle giants. Merging the humanity of the man Arthur, the anatomical perfection of Ballas's Warframes, and the titanic potency of the Grey strain. My saviors.
In order to have a method of healing derived from his own time, one would have to assume the virus evolved much in the same manner as in his world. Otherwise, it would beg to question how he knew it would be effective. Of course, like most everything else we know about Entradi, he may have just thrown caution to the wind and started injecting people, as it would appear to be part of his modus operandi in other areas of his research. But him calling it healing from his own time strongly insinuates his knowledge of the end product. If you want to know more about what the details of his rather egregious scientific practices are, you should check this video I did previously, giving a detailed look into his history, and you can be the judge in the end. As we're to understand, it's the Helminth strain of the Infestation, the same one utilized by the Orkin in order to create the Warframes, essentially administering this super soldier variant of the original Infestation to all volunteers who were already infected. In essence, he created an army of Warframes with the same predisposition to uncontrollable rage and godlike invulnerability, and, well,
Their humanity may not last. My deliverance may yet consume them. The human swallowed up in the sacred beast. And if my wayward disciples turn on me, what words of comfort shall I have beyond? This is the bargain we have made. Through our sacrifice, history will be saved.
is just hoping for the best in the end. An incredibly flawed mentality in the idea that all of it banks on the goodness, or at least the willingness, of a prophesized operator.
It was Lloyd who pointed out the singular attributes of the Grey strain, how it stimulates growth to monstrous dimensions. Many thoughts converged in me then. What if, through precise biochemical engineering, I could create the equivalence of Warframes, yet built to a titanic scale? Surely such a legion could stand against the adversary? Assuming, of course, that an operator could be found.
Taking on and being in charge of making his plan for the future of the universe come to fruition. However, in looking deeper into this Helminth strain, we may come to see why he's so confident in the success of his plan. Namely that it's more than likely the mind that controls Helminth is either Orkin in nature, or, if nothing else, operates with the Orkin's best interests at heart. If it has one. Perhaps a hybrid of the Infestation and a kind of artificial, even cephalon intelligence, not unlike what we saw with the Jordis Golem.
That is not enough for him. You are just like all the others. You won't kill the golem. I don't want you to.
But programmed specifically to service and repair Warframes, and as its name suggests, lives within said Warframes and the vessels at an atomic level, coursing through their very bodies. Personally, when Helminth speaks, I wonder if it's all of him speaking at the same time. The reason the speech we hear is clearly noted with subtitles while sounding like an entirely different language altogether, further supported by the parentheses around it, with us most likely hearing it both in our heads and in a chorus around us. Billions of nanites talking in unison, perhaps why it's so hard to understand, just briefly off in timing. And this aspect of the Infested has been faithfully performing its duties as long as we've had Warframes, essentially even before the door could be opened. There are, in fact, many interesting similarities between Helminth's speech patterns and Balas's. Not only in the fact that they are the only character in the game that instinctively calls the Tenno children demon, but it's also the manner by which they do so. When the doors first open, presumably with a Nidus frame, but even with others, Helminth calls the Warframe Master. However, once the Tenno has been revealed to actually be a child of the Zeramin, first, it does make a distinction between the Tenno and the frame. And further, it is shocked to see the child in person, wondering how it's awake, which would again seem to infer that Helminth has a cursory knowledge of the Warframe program as a whole, almost like a colleague or servant. Not unlike how we see both versions of Lloyd behave. Something even Alan V didn't share when he was infected.
You see, Tenno, my new flesh comes with new desire. This infestation and I are one. I want what it wants, and it wants what I want.
Becoming more and more a part of the infestation, no longer referring to himself singularly, rather considering himself part of them now. The Warframes are uncontrollable to all but the Tenno, yet Helminth is both reserved and obedient. The minds that appear to be leading the infested we are tasked with fighting appear completely feral, even a Cephalon overtaken like Jordis.
I told you not to come.
Please, they did.
Almost fighting itself for control and increasingly unable to contemplate any type of purpose outside of consuming. Yet Helminth, on the surface at least, is none of these things. And consider the Warframes, and at this point the Operator, as the dominant entity, a kind of mind to serve both of them if you think about it. What exactly happened to the other minds that turned them so feral or ravenous? And if Helminth is the final evolution, why was it not administered to everybody infected? Being created by man, one would assume that along with being programmed to have a particular function, safeguards against their technology running rampant or even differently from its initial purpose would have had to have been installed at the onset. Yet, from how the faction is portrayed as a whole, their abilities to communicate or reason in any way seem largely absent or even missing entirely, depending on the instance. It's often we, as the Warframe, fight against the infested and are never contacted or communicated with, and yet there are instances where the infested does specifically talk to us, as in the aforementioned Jordis Golem, as well as Arlo, the supposed healing child that turned out to be anything but. One trait it does seem to share, though, across variants, is its fear of the void, much like other familiar Orkin. Not only does Helminth in particular seem uncomfortable around our Operator, at least in the beginning, recordings found in the lead up to the Whispers in the Walls paint a similar picture of this behavior. 3 different recordings, calls into a program hosted by Nora Knight, show a very distinct trend that something very troublesome tied to the infested moon of Deimos was beginning to happen, and one in particular, coming from Latrox Un, directly from the moon's surface, details the planet itself is showing the distinct signs of fear. Whatever, whoever the infested seem very, very afraid of is causing the exocrine, part of the makeup of the planet, to become mutated or furtive, and the capillaries pumping blood faster and faster. The hyphalomosaurs should be blooming this time of year, but they're dull, discolored. I think they're trying not to stand out, trying not to be noticed. But goes on to state that what's even bothering him is, like, knocking, old pipes, or a rhythm. No, I think it sort of sounded like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, like the Orkin waltzes my old quartermaster used to play. Did I say something wrong? For those unaware, Deimos originally became infested due to a cascade bomb delivered by the pair of Belric and Rania, 2 Orkin who had utilized it as a last-ditch effort to defeat the sentience that had overrun the moon, one that had significant value to them given that this was where the vast majority of their void technology was derived and housed. Being on the very same rock, it's strongly insinuated to be showing its dread of the void entity, something it very much seems to share with the Orokin who have seen it specifically. This would in fact imply that it can feel emotion, which also portrays a level of sentience in some form. So, does Helminth care about our Warframes? Feeling some sort of affection towards them, and further, is that a natural inclination, or one that was installed or programmed? What makes Helminth unique enough to not attempt to overtake the entirety of our orbiter and railjack, leaving the Tenno child floating in deep space? Or taking over the Warframes and attacking us en masse? Even like the infested Mesa frame Alad V was able to infect during the Patient Zero quest. A strain seemingly controlled by him, or one that at least allows him to believe he was in control, and instead asks to be fed, much in the same way a pet would, all the while being the first pet to actually do work around the house in its Warframe cleanup duties. Is the fear of the Tenno and their connection to the Void the only reason Helminth continues to serve us? The existence of a strain of the Infested that is controllable in any way brings up a lot of questions. What did the Orokin do here to make this strain so agreeable to the tasks it's been given? It stands to reason that Helminth is not the chair, but rather the collection of near-atomic particles functioning in unison, and that they control all of what happens in the infirmary. Are they also able to create new Warframes? If we were to bring a human being into this room and inject them, would we not, in theory, be able to make new Warframes ourselves without the need for ballast? Aside from administering the virus, we never really see what's all required for the procedure, but we certainly have the chair and the strain, don't we? So why do human beings injected with Helminth become so unhinged when the strain itself seems agreeable to the program as a whole, acting like our own personal tailor, making sure our suits are in fine working order before ever leaving the ship? Personally, I can't shake the feeling that the Orokin were much more successful with the Infested than they let on. And if I'm right, they just didn't want the truth ever coming to light. If its origin becomes overly similar to that of Dark Sector, it makes me very much question the idea that the virus mistakenly overtook parts of the system, and rather establishes a new suspicion, one that has the Orokin utilizing the infestation for the very problem they claim to want to fix, but in a much more twisted capacity. You see, we all know about the Zariman 10-0 and its trip to the Tau system in order to colonize a new land for the Orokin, but this was done largely to the fact that they had already stripped and even destroyed most of the planets within the Origin system. It was, as a whole, severely overpopulated, and if the history of Dark Sector is to be considered, would it be so out of the question for them to develop a virus meant solely for the sake of population degrowth, infecting each world specifically to repurpose everything, plants, animals, people, into a new organism with characteristics and functions ideal for survival and self-defense? This would fall in line with the Zariman's failure as well, and subsequent treatment by the Orokin executors.
We stretched forth our great hands, shaped to match our generosity, and we gave such abundance. You citizens were to be the first to settle a new system. And now, your bestial defiance has cast you into the pit. Come to those hands again, and you will find them closed to you.
Casting them to their own combined fates for something that the Orokin themselves were responsible for in the first place. And I've even postulated the Zariman's failure as to be predetermined. So the questions that yet remain: why does this chair serve us so diligently? And is it because that's what it was created to do, just like every other strain of the Infested? And if you can get behind that, ask yourself, who does it really serve? And do they serve them yet still? With that being said, I hope you enjoyed today's video and it got you thinking about what actually goes on in this room, and how and maybe why it continues to serve you, the master, the demon. At any rate, I hope you all have a wonderful day today, a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll talk at you all in the next one. Take care, everybody. Bye.